As I mentioned, this afternoon session is Basic Training 8. This is going to be user training, scheduling for basic users. Users just about always exclusively use the web portal to do things like view the schedule, check their balances of time, put in for time off, request overtime, things of that nature. Everything that a user needs to do, they should be able to do in just about every case through the web portal. We also have an app available now for Android and iPhone users that will allow you to do most of the things that you can do on the web on your phone. So things like requesting time off and doing the schedule, you can also do through the app. So those are the primary ways that a user will interact with the system. To access the web, your user can go to the web page that's been provided for your department, and they will see a login screen that looks like this. To sign in, they're going to go ahead and enter whatever username you have assigned to them, and their password, whatever password you may have set up as a default password to get them started. This will allow you to log in. And from here, you'll be able to start doing a handful of different items in the system. Now, again, this is a basic training, so we're going to cover some of the basic items today. We're going to talk about the different ways you can view the schedule. We're going to talk about requesting time off and overtime and requesting switches. And we'll talk about some reports and a couple of settings items that users can work on. We're not going to get into any of the advanced items here. Things like open shifts or extra duty sign up. Those items will be covered with those specific topics. So if your department uses open shifts, you can take a class that deals with open shifts, and that will be discussed there. Same thing with extra duty. If you're using extra duty for your outside jobs, when you attend the classes about signing up and using extra duty, those screens will be covered during those classes. Okay. To get started, the first couple of screens that I want to show you are under the employee menu. And there's an area here called settings. So we'll cover these few items that employees can do to get themselves ready to use the system. These are items that maybe I would visit the first time I log in and get them set up and squared away. The first one I want to talk about is change password. Now, for brand new users, it is possible to set it so that way they are required to change their password the first time they log in. And most departments will set that way. So when they log in the first time, they'll go directly to this screen here, and the system will request that they change their password before moving on. Changing your password is pretty simple, very similar to changing your password on any other website that you might use. We're just going to go ahead and enter our current password once, and then enter our new password twice. Now you'll see an item in blue up here that says, for enforced rules, you have to have a minimum of 8 characters and at least 1 capital, 1 lowercase, 1 digit, and 1 special character. That is not applicable to all departments. That is a setting that you can set in your company profile. So by default, that setting is not turned on, and I can make my password whatever I want it to be. If your department is using the enforced rules, then you will have to make sure your password meets these requirements. And if the password you submit does not meet those requirements, it will give you a warning that you have to try a different password. Otherwise, once I have my current password entered once and my new password twice, when I click Submit, if the new password matches the Confirm New Password line, you'll get a message right here that says your new password has been saved. I want to point out that message right there because some people, when they submit their change of password, they miss that message and they end up trying to submit it again, and at that point it's already changed their password and it tells them it's not recognizing the password they're entering. So just be very attentive to this area here and look for that message that says that your password has been saved. Now, the system will not require you to change your password every month or 2 months or 3 months, anything like that. Once you set your password, that password will remain unless you decide to go in and change it. And if you ever did want to change your password, you could always go back under the employee menu to change password, and you're free to change that whenever you like. Okay, so that's how you can change your password in here. The next item we're going to go to under settings is called personnel information. This screen will allow me to enter or update any information, any personnel information that's been entered into the system. So depending on how much you entered for your employees when you were putting them in the system, that will dictate how much information you see here. The user can go in and make adjustments to this as needed. The most important items for our system are going to be your email address. Important because the system will send email notifications when you request a day off or when that day off gets approved or denied. Other important items can be the phone numbers here, the contact numbers. Those are important if your department is using overtime replacement policy to generate a call list, because it will pull these phone numbers into that list for a supervisor to call for overtime. And then text message address can also be important for some departments if they are planning on sending messages out as text messages to notify people of things like available overtime or other situations that might be happening in your department. Okay, other than that, the employee's address and their emergency contact information are informational items. They're great to have in there, to have a complete profile for that employee, but generally speaking, they're not really used for much in our system, with the possible exception of maybe a report or two that you could run to get the employee information into a report you might need for other purposes. Okay. With that being said, for me to go in and enter any of this information or edit it, I do need to have all the items in red entered. They're required. So right now, if I wanted to put my phone number, I would have to enter my address as well. All the items labeled in blue are optional, so you don't have to fill them out if you don't want to or if your department's not using them. Once I have that information entered, I come down here and I click Save. And again, this is something that you can go into as often as you need to update that information. If your phone number changes or address, you can go in here and update it. And the final item under settings is Set Homepage. And this just allows you to go in and choose a home page. What's the first page that I see whenever I log on to the website? So by default, it's set to be the employee statistical report, which is fine, but some people would rather have it go to the daily schedule or maybe their monthly calendar. Some people only log into the website maybe to put in a request for time off or overtime, so you can have it load right up to those screens if you like. Whichever screen you want, you just choose it from the drop-down and click Save. You'll get a message up here that says Save Successful. And the next time you log into the web portal, you will load up that page first. And again, this is an item that you can go in and change whenever you like. So you may pick something to get started, and maybe down the line you decide there's a better option that you would rather use. You can go into that screen and change your home page as often as you may need to. Okay? So those are a few items in the settings menu. Does anybody have any questions about any of those items? Okay, I don't see any questions coming through. So we'll go ahead and move on to our next topic. The next set of items we're going to look at are the different ways that we can view the schedule from the website. And those are going to be found here under the View Schedule menu. So we get a couple different options here in our sidebar. The first one I'll show you is the daily schedule. Daily schedule consists of up to 6 blocks per page, with each block representing a different shift for your department. So in our example here, we have day shift, night shift, detective bureau, PD administration, and records. In each block, we see a list of names of people that are scheduled to be working that day, along with their title next to their name. To the left is a column for job assignment. So if your department is assigning jobs or posts or beats or zones through our system, that information will show in this left-hand column here. Over on the right, we have a section for details. And this could be a couple of different things. If somebody's start and end times have been adjusted to be different than the normal start and end times for that shift, we can have those show there. If an employee has been assigned to some scheduled details, which are usually items or pieces of equipment that can be assigned to employees, they'll show in that area as well. In this case here, car 3 and taser 1. Additionally, if an employee is on a day off or an overtime that day, their name will be highlighted in a color. And in the details area, it will show a code indicating what type of time off they're on or what the reason for the overtime that they're working. And then finally, it's also possible to add comments to the schedule that would show in this area here across from someone's name. So maybe a note about something that person's doing that day, or a training they're supposed to attend, or an event they're supposed to go to. Those schedule comments would appear in this area as well. Okay? Over here we have the date that we're currently viewing. We have some buttons here that will allow us to go to the next day or the previous day. The double arrows will go ahead a week or back a week. And this calendar button will open up a small calendar view that will allow me to pick a date I want to view and jump right to that day. The Today button in the center will always bring me back to the current day's date. Over here we have a drop-down that will allow me to choose a different daily schedule dashboard or layout if my department has more than one. A lot of departments may only have one, but some places might have like a patrol view and might have a records view or a investigations view. So if you do have multiple views, you can choose them from the drop-down here. We also have some buttons over on the right that can be used if your view has more than one page. So if we had more than 6 shifts, instead of having a whole separate view, we could just put another set of 6 shifts on the next page. And this button would allow us to go to that page. We can have as many pages as you need, so you can keep arrowing over for as many pages as you might have. This arrow will go to the previous page. And the home button in the center will always bring you back to the first page of that daily schedule view. Okay, that's our daily schedule. We also have a weekly schedule. Weekly schedule is going to be set up by group, and whatever group I'm a part of is going to be the first group that we load up here. And I can see the people who are part of that group, when they're working, when they're off. We'll start to see time off entries appear on here as well. I can use the drop down here to choose different groups if I want to look at the schedule for other groups. And here you can see a time off entry starting to populate on this view here. The week that I'm viewing is whatever week contains this date right here. If I wanted to look at next week's schedule, I just pick any day next week, and I'll see the schedule for that week. Okay, next is our monthly schedule. And this works very similar to our weekly schedule. It's set up by group. I see my group first, the names of everybody who's in that group, the days that they're scheduled to work, the days that they're off. And I can choose other groups and view their schedule as well. I can also see time off start to show. We have a little bit less room here, so we use a single letter abbreviation for the shift and for the type of time off that's being used. And then we also have a yearly calendar, which would allow me to see my schedule for a year at a time. Now, for our sample database here, we only have 1 month kind of filled out, but you can see the schedule indicates when someone's working, when they're off. You can see what shift they're working. And time off and overtime entries will start to populate on this view as well using the color key that you see up here. Okay. So those are some of the views that we have available on the web. Different ways that you can look at the schedule. Does anybody have any questions about those views and what they can see? What's displayed on them? Okay. All right, so we're going to move on to some of the actions that an employee might do when they're logged into the web page here. They're going to be located under the employee menu and in the actions section. First one we're going to look at is schedule time off. This is the page that I would go to when I want to put in for a day off. So when we go to this screen here, the employee's name will show up here by default. And we can start filling out the other items that are labeled in red to submit a request. First thing we have is our dates. If I want to put in for a single day, then I can just have my dates be matching. Or I could put in for a date range by setting a different start date and end date. It's worth mentioning that if you are putting in for a range of days, the system knows when you're working and when you're not. So it knows to ignore any of your regular days off and only charge you for the days that you're actually scheduled to work. So if I'm scheduled to be off on Saturday and Sunday, and I want to put in for off for a long weekend, like Friday through Monday, I can put in Friday as my start date and Monday as my end date, and the system will know to ignore Saturday and Sunday and only charge me for the 2 days I'm scheduled to work. Okay, the next item here is shift. Now, for most people in most departments, you can leave this as all shifts. And what that means is any shift that I'm working on the days that I want to take off, put me off. Assign me to a day off for those days. This is a drop-down, however, and it will populate with any shifts that I'm scheduled to work in that period of time. So it is possible, maybe my schedule rotates between days and nights, and I want to put in for a range of time off, but I only want to take off on the days that I'm working days, or only on the days that I'm working nights. So in that scenario, it would come in handy to be able to choose and identify to only put me off for specific shifts in that date range. That can also be useful for people in investigations who might have an on-call shift built into their schedule. They wouldn't want to leave it as all shifts because that will then end up charging them too many hours for taking the day off. It'll try to put them on the day off on the on-call shift, and usually that's not how that works, so they'll end up being charged too many hours. So in their case, it's good to be able to select just their regular work shift for the day off. The next item is part of day. If I'm taking the whole day off, I can leave this as entire day. If I'm taking just a partial day off, I can identify if it's the first part of my shift or the second part of my shift. When I choose those items, I'm going to see additional fields pop up that will allow me to identify exactly what time I need to take off, which hours I want to take off. But obviously we don't have those fields when we're saying entire day because the system already knows that you want the whole day off. Next item is reason. Which type of time off do I want to request? So in this drop-down, you'll see the different types of time that have been entered for your department. And I can choose from anything on that list. You'll notice a note here that says unpaid lunch will be deducted. That note will display anytime you're entering a day off request for the entire day. And this is just a reminder that says that if you submit this, it's going to subtract any minutes of unpaid lunch that have been entered into your profile. Now, for a lot of people, this doesn't mean anything. It's not something that they use. You don't have an unpaid lunch. Your lunch is included in your work hours. That's fine. You can just ignore it. It's only there for people that do have an unpaid lunch as a reminder that the lunch hours will be deducted. The next item, and the last required item, is status. Now, as a user, my only option is to submit this as a request. I can't put it in as approved for myself. The next field here, comments, is an optional field. That's why it's not labeled in red. And it's just a free entry field that lets me put any notes or comments about why I'm taking off. So you can put something in there if you like. And continuing down here, we see a checkbox that says send email to defaults. I recommend leaving that checked. That means that in the background, it will automatically send out emails to the people who should be notified about this request. And once I have those items filled out, I can go ahead down here and click Save. And if my request goes through, we'll get a pop-up here that says your request has been saved. It'll be noted up here as well. And as we saw before, that'll start to populate your different schedule views, such as your daily schedule. So the person's name highlighted in blue, which is the color we chose for requested time off, and VAC for vacation, and a question mark also indicating that it is a request. And we'll see it on our other schedules as well. And my yearly calendar. Okay, so filling out that form is how an employee can request a day or a block of days off. Does anybody have any questions about filling out that form? Okay. All right, great. So we'll move on to our next item, which is still under the employee menu and still under actions. We're going to look at request overtime payment. This is a form I can fill out when I've worked overtime and I want to indicate that I've worked that overtime, and I want to indicate how I would like to be paid for it. Now, for most departments, this isn't something that I would use for a pre-planned or pre-scheduled overtime. In other words, if there's a shortage next week and a supervisor is going to give me that overtime, whether they use open shifts or replacement policy, or they just pick my name off a list and they go ahead and award it to me. Those types of things should be put in by the supervisor in advance, so that way the schedule shows correct and we know everybody who's expected to be working that day. Most departments use this form for our unexpected or unplanned overtime. So I was working my shift, and at the end of my shift, I had a late call, or I had to stay late to finish some reports from an incident that happened. Or maybe I was on my day off and I had to go to court. You know, my supervisor might not know that information to put it in for me, so it might rest on me to submit this form to make sure that I get paid for it. Okay, so we'll go ahead, we'll put in an example of this as well. We're going to, again, pay attention to the items in red here. My name is already in the employee section. Next thing I do is I choose the date that I worked the overtime. So maybe it was yesterday. And I choose the shift that I worked the overtime. Maybe yesterday I was working day shift and I had to stay a little bit late to finish up. Next is our reason. In this case, again, maybe it was a late call at the end of my shift. And then I can choose my pay type. Your pay type may vary depending on what overtime reason you have selected. It is possible for administrators to lock certain reasons to certain pay types. So just be aware that those options can vary. In this case, I'll choose overtime pay. And then our dates, our times here have filled out automatically based on the shift. But in this case, my overtime wasn't from 07 to 19. My overtime started at 19 and maybe went to 20. As it mentions here in hours, I can leave this alone and the system will automatically recalculate the hours once I hit save. So I can leave that be. My next item here is status. Again, as a user, my only option is to submit this as a request. And again, we have an optional comments field. Not required, but it might be a place I might want to enter a note about why I had this overtime. Maybe I want to put a call number or a case number or a description of what I was doing there. And just like with time off, we want to leave our checkbox checked, so that way we automatically send our emails to our defaults in the background. And then finally, I can go ahead and click Save. And we'll be notified that our request has been saved. And like with time off, that will start to show up on our daily schedule as well. So if we look at yesterday's schedule, we have my regular shift and then an hour of overtime that I'm requesting. You can also see it on your yearly calendar as well. Okay, so that's how an employee can go in and submit a request for overtime payment for an overtime that they may have worked. Does anybody have any questions about using that screen and submitting those requests? Okay, I don't see any questions coming through, so we'll move on to our next item, still under the employee menu and under actions. And that item is request switch. Okay, for some departments, employees may do a switch or a substitution. A switch would be a scenario where I might say, I'm going to work for you today, and you're going to work for me tomorrow to pay me back. So a switch would be a situation where it's close-ended. We know when you're going to pay me back. We know both parts of the switch. A substitution is more open-ended. So I'm going to work for you today, and then you'll pay me back sometime down the line. We'll figure it out later. Okay, so if your department allows this, then you can have your employees submit a request for these items using this screen. Okay, I'm going to go back to our schedule real quick and so I can come up with a good example, so we're not trying to force one in here. So we'll say that Darren Coleman is going to switch with Arthur Sullivan. So first I would pick my name here, the date that I'm scheduled to work, and then I hit update, and the system will check to see what shift I'm working that day. In this case, day shift. And actually, looks like security is a little too tight here for this employee. You can't select the other employees at the moment. That would just be a matter of adjusting their security. But you would pick the other person's name here, and you would choose the date that they're working. In the case of our example, it would be the 20th as well. And if we hit update, that would find that that employee was working the night shift. And once you're satisfied with those items, you would hit request. And that's going to submit the request saying that Darren is going to work the night shift and the other person is going to work the day shift. That's also going to send out an email in the background to both members of the switch, so that way they're aware that their names are being used as part of a switch request. And also to the supervisors of both those employees, so that way one of them can go in and approve the switch. The only requirements for submitting a request here is that an employee can't be switching to a day that or in a shift that they're already working. And both employees have to have a matching skill set, a minimum staffing skill set. So in other words, if one person was an officer and one person was a records clerk, it would not let you submit that switch. It would tell you that they both have to have matching validation skill sets. Okay, so that's how you can submit a switch request. You can also submit a request for a substitution, which again is an open-ended type of switch. I'll work for you today, you pay me back sometime down the line when I need it. So this is set up very similar. I'd have my name here. I'd choose the day that I'm working and the shift that I'm working. And then I would choose the employee who's going to cover for me. With Substitute, you also need to enter the start and end time. So if the person's going to cover the entire shift, that's great. I can put the full shift hours in here. But this could also be used to enter a partial substitution. Maybe this person is going to work for me, but only for 4 hours of my shift. So Substitute can be used for partial substitutions as well as a full shift. And again, once you have that filled out, you'll come down here and click Request, and that will also generate the same types of emails as requesting a switch does. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about using this form to request a switch or a substitution? Okay. All right, moving on. Our last couple of items are a few different reports that we can give the users access to. They're found in two different places. The first place is under the Employee menu. Down at the bottom here, we have a section of reports. These are kind of like quick access or reports that can be run very quickly without much customization. So if I click on one of them, like Administrative Days Log, this is going to open up the report for me for the current year. In this case, Administrative Days Log is going to show me any time it's been added to or subtracted from my bank. So I can see the date, what type of time, how much was added or subtracted, and then there'll be a spot there for reason text that could be entered by the person who's adding the time. So you'll see that when starting balances are entered, when the system adds time to your bank every year or every month or however often you get it. If any manual adjustments have to be made, and when you work overtime, if you take it as comp, you'll also see the comp time being added to your bank here. Okay, that's the Administrative Days Log. Next one is Balance of Time Off. This will show me all the different types of banks that have been set up in the system, how much time I've been given this year, how much time I've used, and what my balances are. Overtime activity is going to be a list of all the overtime that I have in the system for the current year. That'll have the type of overtime, the date, the number of hours, the status, the start time, and the end time. And time off activity will be a list of all the time off entries I have in the system for the current year. Type of time off, date, shift, number of hours, status, start time, end time, and reason text. Okay, so those reports there are all great for me to just quickly run them for the whole year. Doesn't give me a lot of opportunity for fine-tuning them or setting parameters. They're also not really formatted to be printed. So if I wanted to run a report where I control what information is returned, or if I needed to be able to save it as a PDF or an Excel, I can go to the Reports menu, and I can find actually the same reports here. For example, time off activity report, or I'll do balance of time off report. That's a good one. But this one lets me set the parameters. I can adjust the date range if I wanted to look back at last year or something like that. I can choose the employees, which in my case would just be myself, because that's all I have access to. And I can also narrow it down to certain reasons. Maybe if I didn't want all the reasons, I can narrow it down to just a few. Or I can do them all if I like. And then when I hit search, that's going to bring back this information here. My name, my different banks, how much time I was given, how much time I used, what my balance is. It's also going to give me an image over here as either a pie chart or a bar graph. I can save that image if I like using this Save button here. Or I can minimize it off to the side if I just want to focus on the report itself. And from here, I can choose to save this report as a PDF or an Excel. Okay, so most of the reports in this reports menu work that way. And again, it's good for if you want to run a report that maybe is narrowed down to just certain dates or certain reasons. The only one that's a little bit different is this one right here called the Employee Statistical Report. This report is going to give you a whole bunch of information, all compiled into one report. It's going to default to the current year, but I can change the dates if I want to. And then we'll see all this information that's available in this report. Some of these things we've already seen. Time balances are here. Time off activity, overtime activity, and administrative days log. But we also have a few additional pieces of information. We have work trends. What days do I tend to work? What days do I tend to take off? What days do I tend to work overtime? Schools. If your department is using our training module to track what schools or trainings I've been to, I'd be able to see the name of the school, the dates, the number of hours, if there was a certification associated with it, and when it expired. If your department's using extra duty for outside jobs, I can see the date, the vendor, the job description, the location, the start time, the end time, number of hours, my hourly pay rate if applicable, and then a status which would indicate if the job had been invoiced yet or if it had been paid yet. Court, if your department is using our court alert module, this would show any subpoenas that had been entered for me. And then finally at the bottom, time sellback. If your department allows employees to sell any time back, maybe throughout the year or maybe just at certain times of the year, that information will show here. What type of time they sold back, how much, when, and who processed that sellback. Okay, so that's the Employee Statistical Report. It has a lot of information about me compiled into one report. As I mentioned earlier, that is the default homepage, so you'll start up loading to that page unless you choose something else. Okay, anybody have any questions about running reports through the web portal? Either the simple reports from the employee menu or the reports that you can set up and save as PDF or Excel that are found under the reports menu. Okay. Last item that I'll show you real quick is there's a help and training item right here. This opens up a new tab in your web browser and brings you to our support page. This page allows you to look through articles and videos on how to use different items in the software. So I can go through and I can browse by topic, and I can look and see what's available there. We have some videos here. I can watch a video on how to use the employee statistical report, and this will let me watch it right from in here. Or I can search. If there's a certain screen that I want to get some more information on, I can search it here. We'll actually look at this here. So we can look at how do I request a switch. And that will give me an article on how to use the request switch screen. The page is opened as a separate tab, so you can go back and forth between your article or your video and your actual page over here. So you can follow along and maybe enter items as you're going along. Once you're done with this, you just close this tab out, and the system will, or the page will go back to wherever you left off on the web portal. Hopefully, most of the user items are user-friendly and intuitive enough that they wouldn't really need those items, but that information is there in case someone did need to look something up. And that's available to anyone who logs into the web portal. So users, supervisors, anyone can access that page. Okay. So those are the items that we want to cover today as the scheduling needs for a basic user. Does anybody have any questions on anything that we covered today? Our employee settings, which dealt with changing our password, adjusting our personnel information, or setting our home page. Any of our view schedule options. Any of our employee actions like requesting time off, requesting overtime, and requesting a switch. Or any of the reporting features that are available on the web, the basic reports or the more customizable and printable ones. Does anybody have any questions on any of those items that we've covered today? Okay, if nobody has any questions, then that concludes our training for today. Just a reminder to sign up for any additional training sessions that you may want to attend using the same website that you signed up for these items. Also, don't forget to sign up for help out sessions if you need any one-on-one time with a trainer to go over any specific items, maybe things that are specific to your department. And also keep your eyes out for the video of this session in case you need to review it again or maybe pass it on to someone else to watch the video. Okay. Thanks again for your time today, everyone. Have a great day.